He stood in the center of the courtroom, an arrogant smirk plastered on his face, convinced he had just pulled off the perfect robbery of his own marriage. Gregory Reynolds told the world his wife was a leech, a woman who spent her days at the spa while he built a multi-million-dollar logistics empire from the ground up. He thought he had erased her contribution. He thought she was too weak to fight back. But Gregory forgot one crucial thing. Paper trails never lie. When the judge lifted the first confidential merger file and saw the familiar, elegant signature at the bottom, the silence in that room was deafening. This is the story of how one man's greed became his ultimate, humiliating undoing. The envelope on the kitchen counter wasn't innocent. It was heavy, cream-colored, and bore the embossed logo of Spector, Ross and Associates, the most ruthless divorce firm in Chicago. Cassandra Reynolds stared at it, her morning coffee turning cold in her hands. The marble island of their sprawling penthouse felt colder than usual. Outside, the grey skyline of the city loomed, a concrete jungle that her husband, Gregory Reynolds, claimed to own. "Did you find it?" The voice came from the doorway. Gregory stood there, adjusting his silk tie. He looked every inch the titan of industry that Forbes had labeled him just last month. Tall, broad-shouldered, with silver fox hair that made him look distinguished rather than old. He was 52, but he had the energy of a man in his 30s, mostly because he fed on conflict. Cassandra, 48, and wearing a simple cashmere cardigan, didn't turn around. "I found it, Greg." "You're filing?" "It's not personal, Cassie," he said, walking over to the espresso machine as if discussing a weather report. "It's just evolution. We've evolved in different directions. I'm scaling new heights with Reynolds Logistics. We're going global next quarter. And you," he gestured vaguely at her, and by extension, the immaculate house. "You're happy here, staying put." "Staying put," Cassandra repeated, her voice void of emotion. "Is that what you call it? Let's not make a scene. I've been generous. The prenup stands, of course. But I've instructed Arnold to add a stipend. You won't starve, but don't expect a seat at the board table. Or shares. You know you never worked a day in the business." Cassandra turned then. Her eyes were hazel, flecked with green, and currently unreadable. "I never worked a day." Gregory chuckled, a sound that used to make her feel safe, but now sounded like a car door locking. "Come on, Cass. You hosted dinners. You picked out curtains for the office. That's not work, that's support. Work is closing deals in Tokyo at 3 a.m. Work is navigating customs regulations in Brazil. I did that. Me alone." He checked his Rolex. "I have to go. Arnold expects you to sign the preliminary waiver by Friday. It basically states you won't contest the asset division. It's better this way. Clean." He kissed her on the cheek, a dry, perfunctory peck, and walked out. The heavy oak door slammed shut, echoing through the empty, pristine hallway. Cassandra didn't cry. She didn't throw the coffee mug. She simply walked over to the drawer where she kept her household files. She pulled out a small, leather-bound notebook. It wasn't a diary. It was a ledger. For 20 years, Gregory had been the face of Reynolds Logistics. He was the charisma, the handshake, the smile. But Cassandra? Cassandra was the ghost in the machine. She remembered the nights in their first, cramped apartment. Gregory would come home frustrated, unable to understand why his shipments were stuck in customs. He would pass out from exhaustion. Cassandra would stay up. She would read the international trade laws. She would rewrite the manifests. She would draft the emails for him to send in the morning, correcting his grammar, softening his aggressive tone, and finding loopholes he didn't know existed. She had ghostwritten every major proposal. She had structured the tax shelters. She had even designed the algorithmic routing system they used, teaching herself coding while he was out playing golf with clients. But to the world, and apparently to Gregory's deluded ego, she was just the housewife who kept his shirts starched. She picked up her phone. She didn't call a friend to cry. She dialed a number she had memorized years ago, just in case. "Jonathan Hayes," a gruff voice answered. "Jonathan, it's Cassandra Reynolds." He filed. "I see," the lawyer replied, his tone shifting instantly to professional sharpness. "Did he offer the settlement?" "He offered me crumbs and insulted my intelligence. He claims I never worked a day in the company." Jonathan let out a low, dark laugh. "Oh, he's going to regret that." "Do you have the box?" "I have everything," Cassandra said, her hand resting on the leather notebook. "Every draft, every email login, every time-stamped correction from 1998 to today." "Good," Jonathan said. "Don't sign anything. Let him think you're scared. Let him get comfortable. We'll see him in court." The Cook County Courthouse was a buzz of activity 3 months later. The divorce of Gregory and Cassandra Reynolds had hit the tabloids, mostly because Gregory wanted it to. He had hired a PR firm to spin the narrative before they even stepped in front of a judge. "Logistics mogul sheds dead weight," one headline read. "The price of laziness. Reynolds' divorce gets ugly," said another. Gregory walked into the courtroom flanked by Arnold Spector and 2 junior associates. Arnold was a small man with a big voice and a reputation for destroying spouses. He wore suits that cost more than most people's cars and had a smile that resembled a rictus of cruelty. On the other side, Cassandra sat alone with Jonathan Hayes. Jonathan was the opposite of Arnold. He was older, rumpled, wearing a suit that looked like it had been bought off the rack at a department store. He looked like a weary history teacher, not a shark. That was the point. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed. Judge Beverly Wright entered. She was a stern woman with wire-rimmed glasses and a reputation for zero tolerance for theatrics. She took her seat and peered over her spectacles at the 2 parties. "Case number 49201, Reynolds versus Reynolds. We are here for the division of assets and determination of spousal support. Mr. Spector, you may begin your opening statement." Arnold Spector stood up, buttoning his jacket. He didn't use a podium. He paced, owning the room. "Your Honor," Spector began, his voice smooth as oil. "We are here today to correct a misunderstanding. The petitioner, Mrs. Reynolds, is asking for 50% of Reynolds Logistics. 50%. A company valued at $400 million. He paused for dramatic effect, looking at the gallery, then at Cassandra. "Now, marriage is a partnership, yes, in a spiritual sense, but in a business sense. It requires input. It requires sweat equity. Mr. Gregory Reynolds built this company from a single truck. He worked 18-hour days. He missed holidays. He sacrificed his health." Spector walked over to Gregory, placing a hand on his shoulder. "And what did Mrs. Reynolds do during this time? She enjoyed the fruits of that labor. She lived in a penthouse. She drove luxury cars. She had a staff of 3 to manage the home. We have depositions from the housekeeper stating Mrs. Reynolds often didn't leave her bedroom until 10 a.m. "Objection," Jonathan Hayes said lazily, not even looking up from his papers. "Relevance of my client's sleep schedule?" "It goes to the heart of the matter, Your Honor," Spector boomed. "She claims she was a partner. We intend to prove she was a passenger. A passenger who now wants to drive the bus she never helped gas up. We will prove that Cassandra Reynolds never signed a single business check, never attended a board meeting, and never generated a single dollar of revenue. To award her half would be a miscarriage of justice." Spector sat down, looking smug. Gregory leaned over and whispered, "Brutal. I love it." Judge Wright turned to Jonathan. "Mr. Hayes." Jonathan stood up slowly. He didn't pace. He stood behind his desk, holding a single piece of paper. "Your Honor," Jonathan said, his voice quiet, forcing everyone to lean in. "Mr. Spector tells a compelling story. The story of the self-made man. It's a classic American myth. We like that myth. But my client isn't interested in myths. She is interested in facts." Jonathan took off his glasses and cleaned them on his tie. "Mr. Spector claims Mrs. Reynolds never worked. He claims she was a passenger. We intend to show that not only was she the driver, but she also built the engine, drew the map, and fixed the flat tires while Mr. Reynolds was asleep in the back seat. We don't ask for 50% because she was his wife. We ask for 50% because she was the architect." Gregory snorted audibly. "Architect? She can't even change a tire," he muttered, loud enough for the front row to hear. Judge Wright banged her gavel. "Mr. Reynolds, silence. The defense calls its first witness," Spector announced, ignoring Jonathan's opening. "Mr. Gregory Reynolds." Gregory took the stand with the confidence of a man giving a TED talk. He swore to tell the truth, though in his mind, his version of events was the truth. "Mr. Reynolds," Spector asked, "tell the court about the founding of your company." "It was 1998, Gregory began, leaning into the microphone. "I had just been laid off from a trucking firm. I had $5,000 in savings. I bought a used van. I started running local deliveries. I did everything myself. Dispatch, driving, accounting. And where was your wife?" "She was at home. She was supportive emotionally, I suppose. But she didn't understand the business. She was an art history major. She didn't know a logistics manifest from a grocery list." Laughter rippled through the courtroom. Cassandra sat stone-faced. "Did she ever assist you with contracts?" Spector asked. "Never. I handled all legal matters myself, eventually hiring outside counsel." "Did she ever help with the technical side? The software?" "God, no," Gregory laughed. "Cassie struggles to program the DVR. The routing algorithm, the Reynolds route. That was my baby. I spent nights with a whiteboard figuring out those efficiency nodes." "So, to be clear," Spector pressed, "if we look at the corporate filings, the tax returns, the employee handbook, will we find Cassandra Reynolds' name anywhere?" "You will not. Not once. She was never an employee. She was never a consultant. She was my wife. And I took care of her." Spector turned to the judge. "No further questions." Jonathan Hayes stood up. He picked up a large stack of files, thick, dusty, accordion-style folders. He dropped them onto the defense table with a heavy thud that made Gregory jump slightly. "Mr. Reynolds," Jonathan began, walking toward the witness stand, "you mentioned the Reynolds route algorithm. The one that saved your company from bankruptcy in 2004 by optimizing fuel efficiency?" "Yes, it was a breakthrough." "And you designed this on a whiteboard?" "That's right." "Interesting." Jonathan pulled a paper from the top file. "Because I have here the original patent application for the proprietary software used in that algorithm, can you tell me what the handwriting is in the margins of the draft?" Jonathan handed the paper to the bailiff, who passed it to Gregory. Gregory looked at it. It was a photocopy of a notebook page. It was filled with complex mathematical equations, graph theory, nodes, edges. That's my handwriting," Gregory lied. He squinted. The handwriting was looped, precise, and distinctly feminine. It wasn't his blocky scrawl, but he couldn't admit that. "Is it?" Jonathan asked. "Because below the equations there is a note. It says, 'Greg, the node density is too high here. You need to apply Dijkstra's algorithm to solve the shortest path problem. I've written the code for you below." The courtroom went quiet. "And below that," Jonathan continued, "is 30 lines of C++ code. Mr. Reynolds, can you write C++? Gregory shifted in his seat. I dabbled. I might have dictated that to her." "You dictated C++ code?" Jonathan raised an eyebrow, including the syntax for memory allocation and pointer references. "You dictated that to an art history major who can't use a DVR?" It was a long time ago. Maybe she copied it from a book I gave her." "A book," Jonathan repeated. "Okay, let's move on." Jonathan pulled another document. "This is the Grandview merger contract from 2011. This deal expanded your company into Europe. A massive deal. 200 pages of international maritime law." "I remember it well," Gregory said, regaining some composure. "I hammered that out in London over a week." "You did. But here is the draft, sent to the German partners 3 days before you arrived in London. It contains specific clauses regarding the force majeure covering volcanic ash clouds, something that became very relevant that year. Who added that clause?" "I did," Gregory said firmly. "I foresaw the risk." Jonathan smiled. It was a wolfish smile. "Mr. Reynolds, are you aware that metadata exists?" "Meta what?" "Metadata. Digital footprints. We subpoenaed the original Word documents from your old home server, the server you left in the basement when you moved out. The author of the Grandview merger document isn't Gregory Reynolds. The user profile that created, edited, and saved that document for 40 hours straight is named." Jonathan looked at the paper. "Cassie, home." Gregory's face flushed red. "She was typing. I was dictating. She was typing. That's what secretaries do." "So she was your secretary now? A moment ago she didn't know what a manifest was. Now she's typing complex international legal clauses." "She was just transcribing," Gregory shouted. "That doesn't make her a partner." "Okay," Jonathan said, stepping back. "Let's look at something you couldn't dictate." He pulled a third document. This one looked old, yellowed. "This is the initial loan application for the van. 1998. First National Bank. You needed a co-signer because your credit was shot from the layoff. Who co-signed this loan, Mr. Reynolds?" Gregory froze. He had forgotten. It was 25 years ago. I don't recall." "Let me refresh your memory." Jonathan held it up. "It's signed by Cassandra Reynolds, and listed under collateral is inherited jewelry collection, valued at $15,000. A gasp went through the gallery. "She put up her grandmother's jewelry to buy your first truck, Mr. Reynolds. Did you dictate that to her too?" Gregory was sweating now. "That was a personal loan. I paid it back." "But without that loan, there is no truck. No truck, no company, no company, no $400 million. Jonathan walked back to his table. "I have no further questions for this witness at this time. But, Your Honor, we are just getting started." Gregory stepped down, his legs feeling a little wobbly. He glared at Cassandra. She didn't look at him. She was sketching something on a notepad, looking calm, serene, and dangerous. Arnold Spector leaned over to Gregory. "Why didn't you tell me about the loan?" "I forgot," Gregory hissed. "It was 20 years ago. It doesn't matter. One loan doesn't entitle her to half the empire." "And the code? The metadata?" "She was just a typist," Gregory insisted, though his voice lacked its earlier conviction. "We need to pivot," Spector whispered. "We need to attack her character. Make her look unstable. If we can prove she was mentally unfit to be a partner, her help becomes irrelevant." The afternoon session was ugly. Spectre called a series of witnesses designed to paint Cassandra as a neurotic, dependent, and slightly unhinged woman. First was the former housekeeper, Mrs. Higgins. She was clearly nervous. "Mrs. Higgins," Spectre asked, "how would you describe Mrs. Reynolds's daily routine?" "Well," the older woman stammered, "she spent a lot of time in her study. Hours and hours." "Doing what? Watching TV? Drinking?" I don't know. The door was always closed. She told me never to disturb her when the red light was on." "Red light?" Spectre laughed. "Like a recording studio?" "No, just a little light on the door handle. She said she was focusing." "Did she ever cook dinner for Mr. Reynolds?" "Rarely. They usually ordered in, or Mr. Reynolds ate out." "So she ignored her domestic duties to lock herself in a room?" "I suppose." Next came a friend of the family, a socialite named Beatrice, who had clearly sided with Gregory's wallet. "Cassie was always distant," Beatrice testified, adjusting her pearls. "We'd be at a gala, and she'd be scribbling on napkins. It was embarrassing for Gregory. He'd be trying to network, and she'd be in the corner doing math or something. We all thought she was a bit on the spectrum, maybe? Or just rude." Spectre looked at the judge. "You see, Your Honor? Socially awkward. Negligent of her hosting duties. Hardly the profile of a corporate mastermind." Gregory looked satisfied. This was the narrative he wanted. Crazy Cassie. Then Spectre played his ace. He called Tiffany, Gregory's current assistant, a 24-year-old blonde with ambitions larger than her resume. "Tiffany, you work closely with Mr. Reynolds now. Does he handle all the business logic?" "Oh, absolutely," Tiffany beamed. "Greg is a genius. He dictates everything to me. I've never seen anyone else involved." "And have you ever seen Mrs. Reynolds at the office?" "Once. She came in to bring him lunch. She looked lost. She asked me how to use the coffee machine." Tiffany giggled. Cassandra finally looked up. She looked at Tiffany with a mixture of pity and amusement. When it was Jonathan's turn to cross-examine Tiffany, he didn't even stand up. "Miss Tiffany," Jonathan asked from his seat, "you say Mr. Reynolds dictates everything. What happens when the server node fails due to a deadlock in the SQL query?" Tiffany blinked. "Excuse me. If the server crashes because of a deadlock, what instructions does Mr. Reynolds give you?" I call IT. "Ah, you call IT. And who is the head of IT?" "Mr. Henderson." "Thank you." Jonathan looked at the judge. "Your Honor, I would like to call Mr. Marcus Henderson, the Chief Technology Officer of Reynolds Logistics, to the stand." Spectre objected. "Mr. Henderson wasn't on the original witness list." "He is a rebuttal witness," Jonathan countered, "to refute the testimony that Mr. Reynolds is the sole technical genius." Judge Wright nodded. Aloud. "Call Mr. Henderson." Marcus Henderson was a young man in a hoodie and blazer. He looked uncomfortable being in a courtroom. He looked at Gregory with fear, then at Cassandra with respect. "Mr. Henderson," Jonathan said, "you run the IT infrastructure for the company?" "Yes, sir." "When the system crashes, when the algorithm breaks, who fixes it?" "Well, usually I try. But if it's a kernel-level issue in the source code, I can't touch it. It's locked." "Locked by whom?" "The administrator." "And who is the administrator? Is it Mr. Reynolds?" Henderson hesitated. He looked at his boss. Gregory was glaring daggers at him. "Mr. Henderson, you are under oath," Judge Wright reminded him. "No," Henderson said quietly. "Mr. Reynolds doesn't have the admin password. He locks himself out of his email half the time." "Then who has the password? Who fixes the code?" "The account is named Ghost. We just send a ticket to Ghost, and it gets fixed within an hour. usually late at night. Have you ever met Ghost? No. We communicate via encrypted chat, but... Henderson paused. But what? Well, one time, about 3 years ago, Ghost accidentally uploaded a file with a digital signature attached. It wasn't code, it was a recipe for vegan lasagna. Laughter in the court. And, Henderson continued, at the bottom of the recipe, it was signed, Love, Cassie. Gregory's face went white. Jonathan walked to the center of the room. The ghost in the machine, Your Honor. The mysterious fixer who keeps a $400 million company running while Mr. Reynolds is sleeping. It's not a specialized AI. It's not an outsourced team in India. It is the woman sitting right there. The woman who doesn't know how to use a coffee machine. Jonathan turned to Cassandra. Mrs. Reynolds, I think it's time we showed them the filing cabinet. The courtroom air had shifted. It was no longer heavy with Gregory's arrogance. It was thick with tension, the kind that precedes a thunderstorm. Jonathan Hayes placed a large, steel-reinforced banker's box on the evidence table. It landed with a dull, heavy thud that vibrated through the floorboards. Your Honor, Jonathan said, unbuckling the leather straps of the box. Mr. Reynolds claims his wife was a passenger. A passenger observes. A passenger rides along. But a captain steers the ship away from icebergs. We have established that Mrs. Reynolds, or Ghost, handled the technical infrastructure. But the defense argues that coding is just typing. So let us move to the strategic decisions. The decisions that kept Mr. Reynolds out of federal prison. Gregory shot up from his seat. Objection! Prison, this is slander! Sit down, Mr. Reynolds, Judge Wright snapped, her eyes narrowed. Overruled. Mr. Hayes, explain yourself. Jonathan pulled out a thick binder bound in red leather. This is what my client calls the Shadow Ledger. It dates back 15 years. It contains the original drafts of every major crisis management decision made by Reynolds Logistics. He walked the binder to the judge. I would like to direct the court's attention to tab 4, dated August 2018. The Redwater Incident. Gregory's face drained of color. He remembered Redwater. One of their tankers had overturned near a protected reservoir in Ohio. It was a disaster waiting to happen. Mr. Reynolds, Jonathan turned to the witness stand where Gregory had been recalled. Do you remember the press release you drafted that morning? The one you intended to send to the EPA and the media? We had a crisis team, Gregory stammered. No, you wrote a draft, Jonathan corrected. We recovered it from your deleted items. In that draft, you denied the chemical composition of the spill. You claimed it was harmless food-grade oil. You were trying to save the stock price. Do you admit this? It was a preliminary thought. I didn't send it. Exactly, Jonathan boomed. You didn't send it, because someone stopped you. Someone intercepted the email before it hit the server outbox. Someone rewrote the statement, admitting the fault, contacting the cleanup crews immediately, and setting up a community fund. That action saved the company a potential $10 billion class action lawsuit and saved you from perjury charges. Jonathan pointed to the document in front of the judge. Your Honor, at the bottom of the revised order that authorized the cleanup funds that came from a private account, by the way, whose signature is authorized? Judge Wright adjusted her glasses. She flipped the page. She looked at the signature line. It is signed, the judge read slowly, by C. Reynolds, acting as proxy. And the timestamp? Jonathan asked. 3:42 a.m., the judge read. While Mr. Reynolds was asleep, Jonathan said softly. His wife was awake, spending her own inheritance to clean up his mess and rewriting his lies to save his reputation. That is not the work of a housewife, Your Honor. That is the work of a CIO. Jonathan didn't stop there. He pulled file after file. Tab 7. The audit of 2015. Mr. Reynolds wanted to claim personal vacations as business expenses. Mrs. Reynolds removed them manually from the ledger, preventing tax fraud. Tab 12. The acquisition of Blue Dart Trucking. Mr. Reynolds wanted to fire the union workers. Mrs. Reynolds structured a deal to keep them, preventing a strike that would have crippled the supply chain. Every single file, Jonathan said, his voice rising, bears a digital fingerprint, a physical initial, or a handwriting match. Look at the margins, Your Honor. The notes. Greg, don't sign this. Section 4 is a trap. Greg, the valuation is off by 20%. Greg, be nice to this client. His wife is sick. Jonathan turned to the gallery, then back to Gregory. She didn't just work, Gregory. She was the brain. You? You were just the mascot. You were the suit we propped up in front of the cameras while she ran the world from her kitchen table. Arnold Spector, Gregory's shark of a lawyer, looked defeated. He leaned over to his client. You told me she did nothing. You told me she was a trophy. This isn't a trophy, Greg. This is the damn quarterback. She forged them, Gregory shouted, desperation clawing at his throat. It's a trick. She's forging my signature. Actually, Jonathan smiled, pulling one final thin piece of paper from the box. That is the most interesting part. She didn't forge your signature. On the official incorporation documents for the holding company that actually owns the intellectual property of Reynolds Logistics, the company called Cassiopeia Holdings. Jonathan paused for effect. Mr. Reynolds, did you ever wonder why your wife's middle name is the name of a constellation? Gregory blinked. What? Cassandra Cassiopeia Reynolds. You signed a licensing agreement in 2005. You thought it was a tax form. You transferred the ownership of the Reynolds route algorithm to Cassiopeia Holdings to protect it from a lawsuit you were facing at the time. You never transferred it back. Jonathan slammed the paper onto the table. You don't own the tech, Gregory. You are leasing it. From her. And if she wants to, she can terminate the lease. The courtroom erupted. The reporters in the back row were typing furiously on their phones. Judge Wright banged her gavel, but the noise was uncontrollable. Gregory sat there, mouth open, his entire reality fracturing. He wasn't a titan. He was a tenant, and his landlord had just served him an eviction notice. Saturday night in the Reynolds Tower was usually a time of quiet triumph. For years, Gregory Reynolds had stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his 45th floor office, sipping aged scotch and watching the arteries of Chicago's highways pulse with light, knowing that a significant percentage of those lights were his trucks, moving his cargo, making him richer. Tonight, the view offered no comfort. It only mocked him. The office was dark, illuminated only by the harsh blue glow of his computer monitor and the ambient city lights. On the desk lay the morning papers, their headlines screaming his humiliation in bold black ink. The proxy CEO, court reveals wife ran logistics giant. Reynolds stock tumbles as ghost, narrative emerges. Gregory paced the room like a caged animal. His tie was undone, hanging loosely around his neck, and his eyes were bloodshot. He had spent the last 48 hours trying to log into the corporate administrative portal, trying to assert some control, any control, over the beast he claimed to master. Access denied. Invalid credentials. Contact administrator. Every error message was a slap in the face. It was Cassandra's voice, silent but deafening, telling him he was obsolete. She thinks she can embarrass me? Gregory muttered, his voice slurred from the half-empty bottle of Macallan on his desk. He slammed his glass down, the crystal cracking slightly at the base. She thinks she can take my legacy. I built the brand. I shook the hands. I am Reynolds Logistics. He wasn't just angry. He was terrified. The realization was creeping in like a cold draft. Without her, he didn't know how the engine worked. He was a pilot who didn't know how to fly, sitting in a cockpit that had suddenly locked him out. Desperation clawed at his throat. If he couldn't control the company, he would ensure she couldn't have it either. It was the logic of a narcissist, backed into a corner. If the toy isn't mine, I'll break it so no one can play. He snatched up his phone and dialed Miles Henderson, the IT director who had betrayed him on the stand. "Henderson!" Gregory barked as soon as the line connected. "Mr. Reynolds?" Miles's voice was shaky, clearly startled to hear from the man he had helped expose. "Sir, I really shouldn't be speaking to you. The legal department sent a memo." "I don't care about the memo!" Gregory screamed, spit flying from his lips. "I am still the CEO of this company until the ink dries on the divorce decree, and I am giving you a direct order." What is the order, sir?" "I want a hard reset. I want the servers wiped, clean. Initiate the deep clean protocol we use for decommissioning old hardware. Do it now." There was a long silence on the other end. "Sir, the deep clean protocol magnets the drives. It destroys the data permanently. That's obstruction of justice. The court has placed a preservation order on all digital assets. If I do that, we both go to federal prison." "I will pardon you. I will pay your legal fees." Gregory was raving now, pacing faster. "Just do it. Burn it down, Miles. If she wants the company, let her inherit a shell. Let her start from scratch like I did." "I can't," Miles said, his voice finding a surprising spine. "And even if I was willing to ruin my life for you, sir, I can't. I don't have the clearance." "You're the IT director." "I have level 3 clearance," Miles explained, sounding almost pitying. "The server core, the algorithm, the routing history, that's level 1. Only the Ghost account has level 1 access. You know that now." Gregory hung up. He didn't say goodbye. He simply hurled the phone across the room. It smashed into the expensive abstract painting Cassandra had bought him for their 10th anniversary, tearing the canvas before clattering to the floor. "Fine," Gregory hissed, his breathing ragged. "If I can't delete it digitally, I'll delete it physically." He stormed out of his office, bypassing the elevators. He didn't want to be seen. He took the emergency stairwell, descending flight after flight, his expensive Italian leather shoes echoing loudly on the concrete. Down into the belly of the building. The basement levels were a different world. No plush carpets, no mahogany, just raw concrete, buzzing fluorescent lights, and the hum of high-voltage electricity. He reached the server room door. It was reinforced steel, secured by a biometric scanner. Gregory pressed his thumb against the glass. Beep. Access granted. "See?" he whispered to himself, a twisted smile appearing. "I still own this place." He stepped inside. The room was a frozen sanctuary of technology. Rows of black, towering server racks stretched out, blinking with thousands of tiny blue and green lights. The air was frigid, kept at a constant 60 degrees to protect the machines. The noise was a steady, rhythmic drone, the heartbeat of a multi-million-dollar empire. Gregory walked to the emergency station on the wall. Behind a glass panel sat a red fire axe, intended for breaking through debris in an earthquake. He grabbed the handle of the case and pulled. It was locked. Without hesitation, he took his heavy gold watch off his wrist, wrapped it around his fist and punched the glass. It shattered. He pulled the axe free. It was heavy, a tool of brute force. It felt good in his hands. Simple, understandable. Unlike the complex lines of code that had ruined his life, this was something he could control. He walked to the main terminal, the brain of the Reynolds root system. "Let's see you optimize this, Cassie," he sneered, He raised the axe high above his head and brought it down with a primal roar. Crunch! The axe head bit deep into the brushed steel of the chassis. Sparks showered onto the linoleum floor like a sudden, violent firework display. Metal screeched against metal. He swung again. And again. He was panting, sweat dripping into his eyes, destroying the physical manifestation of his wife's genius. He wanted to kill the ghost. Suddenly, the room changed. The steady hum of the fans died instantly. The thousands of blinking blue lights on the racks extinguished in unison. The room was plunged into absolute, suffocating darkness. Gregory froze, the axe mid-swing. What the? A single sound cut through the silence, the click whir of a backup generator kicking in. But the lights didn't come back on. Instead, a single, massive wall monitor at the far end of the room flickered to life. It cast a ghostly white glow over Gregory, illuminating his wild eyes and disheveled suit. Text began to scroll across the screen. Not system code, not error messages. English, Protocol 0 initiated. Gregory lowered the axe, his heart hammering against his ribs. Unauthorized physical trauma detected. Sector 4. "I'm not unauthorized," Gregory shouted at the screen, his voice echoing eerily in the silent tomb of the server room. "I am the owner. I bought these machines." The cursor blinked, as if considering his argument. Then, new text appeared, typing out character by character, painfully slow. "Hello, Gregory." Gregory stumbled back, dropping the axe. It clattered loudly on the floor, the sound sharp and terrifying. "I knew you would come here. I calculated a 94% probability that when you lost control, you would resort to violence." "Cassie," he whispered, looking around the dark corners of the room. Are you watching me? I wrote the security protocols 10 years ago, Greg. Did you really think I would leave my life's work vulnerable to a temper tantrum?" "Stop it," Gregory screamed. "Turn it back on, I command you." The screen turned a deep, angry red. "Command rejected. Asset migration complete. Data has been moved to secure cloud storage. You are hacking an empty shell. Lease terminated. Effective immediately." Upstairs, chaos was erupting. In the 24-hour dispatch center on the 10th floor, phones began to ring simultaneously. It was a cacophony of panic. "Sir, the trucks!" a manager yelled, running toward the elevators. "We're losing them!" On the screens upstairs, thousands of GPS dots representing trucks across the globe were turning from green to red. Vehicle disabled. System lockout. Driver access revoked. Back in the basement, Gregory stared at the red screen. He realized with a sickening thud in his stomach that he hadn't destroyed the data. He had triggered the escape pod. He had forced the ghost to leave the building, and she had taken the company's soul with her. His burner phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out with trembling fingers. A text from Arnold Spector. "Greg, the police scanners just lit up. Automated silent alarm from the server room. They know you're there. They know you're armed. Get out. It's over." Sirens began to wail in the distance, growing louder by the second, piercing the walls of the tower he thought was his fortress. Gregory looked at the screen one last time. The red light faded, replaced by a final message in plain white text. Game over. He sank to the floor, leaning his back against the cooling metal of the destroyed server rack. He sat in the dark, clutching the axe handle like a child clutching a blanket, waiting for the inevitable sound of boots on the stairs. He had wanted to prove he was the powerful one, the man in charge. Instead, he had just proven exactly why she never trusted him with the keys. The silence of the server room was replaced by the chaotic strobe of red and blue lights reflecting off the glass walls of the Reynolds Tower lobby. Gregory Reynolds, the man who had walked into the courthouse days ago as a king, was now being escorted out in handcuffs. He wasn't being charged with corporate espionage yet, but with attempted destruction of evidence and violation of a court injunction. The paparazzi, tipped off by the police scanners, were waiting. The flashes were blinding. Gregory tried to shield his face, but the image was already immortalized. The logistics titan, looking disheveled, sweaty, and terrified, dragged out of his own building like a common burglar. Meanwhile, the global supply chain was beginning to bleed. The stop and hold command that Cassandra's ghost protocol had initiated wasn't just a local pause. It was a global freeze. 5,000 trucks across North America and Europe sat idling in rest stops, distribution centers, and highway shoulders. The drivers, locked out of their digital logs, couldn't move. Perishable goods, seafood from Maine, produce from California, medical supplies for hospitals in Berlin, were stranded. At 8 a.m. on Monday morning, the board of directors of Reynolds Logistics held an emergency meeting. The panic in the room was palpable. The stock price had opened at $45 a share. By 8:15 a.m., it had plummeted to $12. "We are hemorrhaging money," shouted Simon Rutherford, the chairman of the board. "Every minute those trucks don't move cost us $50,000 in penalties. We need to override the system." "We can't," Miles Henderson, the IT director, said, his head in his hands. "I told you, the IP doesn't belong to us. The source code for the routing algorithm is leased from Cassiopeia Holdings. The lease was terminated due to a violation of security terms." That was Gregory taking an axe to the server. "The software has uninstalled itself from the fleet. We are essentially a trucking company that doesn't know where its trucks are." Rutherford slammed his fist on the mahogany table. "Get Gregory on the phone." "Gregory is in a holding cell at the 1st District Precinct." Arnold Spector's voice came from the speakerphone. "And he can't help you. He doesn't know the password. He never did." The room fell silent. They realized the terrifying truth. They had bet on the wrong horse. They had backed the face, not the brain. "Get Mrs. Reynolds," Rutherford whispered. "Beg her. Give her whatever she wants." The negotiation. The meeting didn't happen in the Reynolds Tower. It happened in the conference room of the Cook County Jail, a stark, concrete box that smelled of industrial cleaner and despair. Gregory sat on one side of the metal table, wearing an orange jumpsuit that clashed horribly with his silver hair. He looked aged, deflated. Arnold Spector sat next to him, looking less like a shark and more like a man trying to survive a shipwreck. On the other side sat Jonathan Hayes, looking relaxed, and Cassandra. She wore a white suit, crisp and sharp. She didn't look like the distracted artist or the lazy housewife anymore. She looked like the CEO she had effectively been for 20 years. "Cassie," Gregory croaked, "please. You have to turn it back on. The company, it's dying." "It's not my company, Gregory," she said coolly, opening a file. "According to your testimony last week, I have nothing to do with Reynolds Logistics. I'm just a passenger, remember?" Gregory winced. "I was wrong. I lied, okay? I lied about everything. You did the work. You built the code. You saved us from the EPA. I admit it all." "I know you admit it," she said. "But that doesn't fix the problem. You violated the terms of the lease. You tried to destroy my property, the servers. Cassiopeia Holdings is under no obligation to renew the contract with a partner as volatile as Reynolds Logistics. Think of the drivers," Gregory pleaded. "Think of the employees." "I am thinking of them," Cassandra replied. "That's why I'm here to offer a solution." Jonathan slid a document across the metal table. It wasn't a settlement, it was an acquisition contract. "What is this?" Spector asked, picking it up. "It's a buyout," Jonathan explained. "Cassiopeia Holdings is offering to purchase all outstanding shares of Reynolds Logistics at the current market value. Spector's eyes widened. Current market value? The stock is at 9 talents. It was $50 last week. You crashed the stock on purpose so you could buy it for pennies. I didn't crash the stock, Cassandra corrected him, her voice hard. Gregory crashed the stock when he took a fire axe to the mainframe. I simply protected my intellectual property. The market reacted to his incompetence. This is robbery, Gregory shouted. No, Gregory. Cassandra leaned in, her eyes locking onto his. Robbery is taking 20 years of a woman's life, using her brain to build your fortune, and then discarding her like a wrapper when you think you've outgrown her. That is robbery. This is business. She checked her watch. The offer stands for 30 minutes. If you don't sign, I walk away. The trucks stay stopped. The company declares bankruptcy by Friday. You go to prison for fraud and destruction of property, and you leave with nothing. Not a dime. And if I sign, Gregory whispered. If you sign, Cassandra said, I restart the system. The stock stabilizes. You walk away with the buyout money, about $5 million after your debts and legal fees. You avoid prison because I will drop the destruction of property charges. You retire, you go play golf, you get to be the wealthy divorcee you wanted to be, but you will never step foot in the building again. And your name comes off the sign. Gregory looked at the contract. $5 million. It was a lot of money to most people, but it was a crumb compared to the empire he thought he owned. But the alternative was zero. The alternative was a cell. He looked at Arnold Spector. Spector nodded slowly. It's the only way out, Greg. With a shaking hand, Gregory Reynolds picked up the pen. He didn't read the clauses. He didn't argue. He signed his name, the signature that had been stamped on so many documents he hadn't read, documents Cassandra had written. He pushed the paper back. Done, he whispered. Cassandra didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She simply took the paper, checked the signature, and nodded to Jonathan. Pleasure doing business with you, she said. She stood up and walked to the door. Cassie, Gregory called out, his voice breaking. She stopped, her hand on the heavy steel door. Did you ever love me? Or was I just a project? Cassandra didn't turn around. I loved you enough to build you a kingdom, Greg. You just didn't love me enough to let me live in it. The door clanged shut. The resurrection. 10 minutes later, in the back seat of Jonathan's car, Cassandra pulled out her laptop. She opened a terminal window. The screen was black with green text. System status. Locked, awaiting admin key. She typed in a string of characters. It wasn't a complex mathematical formula. It wasn't a random string of numbers. The password was Partnership 99998. She hit enter. Authentication accepted. System reboot initiated. Uploading patch 4.0. Trucks released. 3,000 miles away, in a truck stop in Nevada, a dashboard tablet lit up. A driver, who had been sleeping in his cab, woke up to the sound of a chime. The screen read, System online. Route optimized. Proceed to destination. In London, in Tokyo, in New York, engines roared to life. The blood of the supply chain began to flow again. The stock market ticker for Reynolds Logistics, soon to be renamed, ticked upward. $10, $15, $20. Cassandra closed the laptop. She looked out the window at the passing city. For the first time in 20 years, she wasn't the ghost in the machine. She was the driver. 2 weeks later, Judge Beverly Wright sat in her chambers, looking at the final decree. The divorce was finalized. The assets were divided according to the settlement. She took off her glasses and looked at Jonathan Hayes, who was packing up his briefcase. I've seen a lot of divorces, Mr. Hayes, the judge said. I've seen people fight over dogs, over silverware, over frequent flyer miles. but I have never seen a dismantling like that." "It wasn't a dismantling, Your Honor," Jonathan said, snapping his briefcase shut. "It was a correction. The universe has a way of balancing the books. Sometimes it just takes a good accountant. And what will Mrs. Reynolds do now?" "She's taking the position of CEO," Jonathan smiled, "and she's rebranding. The company will be called Cassiopeia Logistics." "Fitting," the judge mused, the Queen seated on her throne in the stars. 1 year later, the cover of Fortune magazine featured a woman standing on the tarmac of an airport, a fleet of sleek, modern trucks behind her. She looked powerful, confident, and unapologetically capable. The headline read, "Out of the Shadows, How Cassandra Reynolds Saved an Industry and Redefined Leadership." In a small, rented condo in Florida, Gregory Reynolds picked up the magazine from a newsstand. He looked at the photo. He looked at the smile on her face, a smile he hadn't seen in years because he had been too busy looking at himself. He flipped the magazine over, not wanting to read the article. He knew what it said. It said she was a genius. It said she was an innovator. It said she was the heart of the company. He walked to the counter to pay for his gum. He reached for his wallet, and his hand shook slightly. He was comfortable, yes. He played golf. He drank expensive scotch. But no one called him. No one asked for his advice. He was a ghost now. He walked out into the bright, blinding sun. Just another retiree in a world moved by people who actually did the work. Cassandra sat in her office, the corner office at the top of the tower. The view was magnificent. The desk was covered in files, blueprints, and code. Her assistant, a bright young woman named Maya, walked in. "Ms. Reynolds, the team from Amazon is here for the merger talks." "Send them in, Maya," Cassandra said, signing a document with a flourish. She looked at her signature. It was the same signature that had been on the loan application in 1998, the same signature that had been on the merger files, the safety reports, the tax returns. It had always been there. The world, and Gregory, just hadn't bothered to look. She stood up, smoothed her jacket, and walked toward the door to greet her guests. The ghost was gone. The Queen had arrived. The end. And that is the story of Cassandra and Gregory Reynolds. It's a powerful reminder that in any partnership, whether it's a marriage or a business, the loudest person isn't always the most important one. Gregory made the fatal mistake of confusing visibility with value. He thought because his wife worked in the shadows, she had no power. But he forgot that the foundation of a building is always underground, unseen, and silent. If you remove it, the whole tower falls. Cassandra's victory wasn't just about money, it was about reclaiming her identity and proving that true power doesn't need to shout to be heard, it just needs to sign the right papers. Wow, what a roller coaster! I hope you guys enjoyed this story of ultimate revenge and justice. If you did, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more stories like this. What would you have done if you were Cassandra? Would you have bought the company? Or would you have let Gregory go to prison and taken everything? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss a new story. I've got an even crazier drama coming up next week that involves a hidden will and a secret twin. So stay tuned. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.